introduce Jeff from Zenith, the co-chair. Jeff, you can pop back on. And here we are, just to prove the panelists. So Jeff, I think I'll just let you take it away and introduce our panelists for this next talk.
Okay.
Awesome.
Thank you, Matt. I'm looking for our panelists to appear. And I want to remind everybody this session supplies 1 hour of CPE. Oh, there's Rob. How you doing, Rob?
Good, man.
Good. And we got a couple of other folks that we want to see, and then we'll really get started. But actually, I do have an introduction to this panel and to my personal and Zenith experience in trying to reduce or doing away with paper checks. And it goes back about 20 years when I wanted to bring ACH systematically into the Zenith system as part of bill pay. The industry was looking at the same thing at the same time. Over the 20 years, the panel you're going to see today, I've seen in multiple iterations with the same conversation and some of the same barriers, and we kind of sit where we sit today. But I'm thinking, and unfortunately, obviously, that COVID-19 might be a turning point in this particular subject. That remains to be seen, but we'll talk to these experts, and we'll go ahead and find out about that. So I want to introduce some folks, and I guess we'll start with Rob. Rob, I've known for about 20 years. He's part of Nacha, the organization that sets the rules for the ACH. Rob is really interesting fellow, because when I went to my first, you are Rob, when I went to my first Nacha meeting, mostly large banks and Fortune 500 folks, you could trust that I was an outlier in this room. And I can assure you that Rob, with his humor and who he is, made me feel very comfortable. So you might want to address some of your background, Rob, real quick, and what you do at Nacha and how you make people feel so welcome.
Sure. Hey, everybody. Rob Unger from Nacha, Senior Director of Product Management. So Nacha is probably not an organization you're familiar with, but you're probably familiar with ACH. A lot of people call it EFT because that's what's on their consoles and their software. So you know ACH through direct deposit and through money taken out of your checking account for bills every month. But it's also used for invoice payments, B2B payments, government payments. In fact, last year, almost 25 billion with the B transactions moved through the network, worth almost 50 trillion. That's with the T dollars. So a lot of money moving through that network. But I just listened to the fraud discussion. We don't touch any of that money. We're the rules body. So the Nacha rules really develop the interoperability framework. So 14,000 banks in the United States can exchange transactions. They know what data formats to use, what data requirements to use, what the roles and responsibilities are. So it's the Nacha rules, and we are the nonprofit governing body for the ACH network that really established that interoperability framework.
Thanks, Rob. I want to introduce Jennifer next. I've known her for multiple years now, and we're kind of doing this in order because Rob's organization is setting the rules. Jennifer, being part of Studio Bank in Nashville, servicing business managers, obviously, has to follow those rules. So the one question I do have for Jennifer, because I know her background was big banks, but Studio Bank was a de novo bank, active now for 18 months, in formation for maybe 3 years. And I was actually part of that in a Zenith way, an integration way. And we would all meet in one conference room about 20 miles away from downtown Nashville until the branch came online. And that's where Jennifer's going to talk to us about a little bit of her background.
Absolutely. So it's been super exciting. As Jeff mentioned, before joining the Studio Bank team, I had worked at all the big banks that come to mind, about 25 years in services all in. And this was a really fun opportunity to start at a de novo. I came on board a couple months before we even got our FDIC approval. So I was definitely here for building the groundwork and knowing that Our name is Studio because a studio is where you create things, regardless of, music comes to mind in Nashville, but certainly there are other types of creators, whether you're in the tech industry or the music industry or anything in between. Healthcare, another big one in Nashville. And a studio is oftentimes where you do that creating. And so that's where our name came from. And so we definitely have a focus on banking, business managers, and groups like that I didn't necessarily work with before. So it's been really exciting, and then definitely see a different layer of application for things like ACH and what we're talking about today.
Great. We do have one more panelist who's not with us currently. I hope Jay will be here momentarily. I did hear he's running for president, so he may have stepped off for something else. I'm not sure. He might have a rally someplace. We'll have to find out that on the news, I suppose. As a larger introduction to this topic, and I can't get over this, the number of years I've worked on trying to move forward in the payments, and I know Rob has seen me all the time in Nacha and other industry groups in sessions like this talking or trying to learn. Rob, I want you to think back, Philadelphia, 2003. So we were in an old bank vault downstairs. You remember that?
Yeah, that was a cool building.
From Epcor.
Came
up. Ring the bell.
You just have to share your video.
Okay. Rob, did you remember Phyllis? Did that name sound familiar?
Yeah. It was downtown Philly, near the courthouse, not the courthouse, the legislative building.
Right.
Yeah, big old. There's an old Bank of New York Mellon building. Cool building.
So during one of the sessions, this woman, Phyllis, who was very active in the same subject, came up to speak, took off her sweater, and had a T-shirt that said, "Friends, don't let friends write checks." And that's like 18 years ago. And I want to keep emphasizing this, but it's so important that we haven't made the progress that we've wanted to. And that example is just classic. And the other example, let's bring it up to current times. One of the functions that Zenith provides to our clients is a check issuance function, where checks, once they're approved, they'll print at Zenith and then we'll mail them. Clearly, when COVID came and people were leaving their offices, they were leaving their check printers. And maybe they were not adopters of our product prior to that. And I had multiple conversations. We bring them on board, bring them into what we call the Z-Check, our check issuance product. I had to remind each one of them, you believe you satisfied your problem, you're mailing the check to a completely empty office. So that round trip really wasn't happening. They believe they're satisfying their needs. And it's funny because it goes right back.
All right. How do I don't see my, I'm not sure.
That's kind of my introduction. I want to go in the same hierarchy. We'll start with Rob. I want to know if Nacha has,
I don't know why my camera's not working,
something on the adoption side to make it easier for the institution.
Do we know if my audio is working?
I'm just checking with Nacha to see if it is.
Other conversation going on here. Can you hear that?
Yeah, there's an extra conversation in our presentation background.
Okay. So I think I heard the question, Jeff. Has Nacha done anything to help make it easier to get rid of checks?
Yeah, let me interrupt real quick, Rob. I don't have my rule book with me, but the rule book for Nacha, and Rob's laughing, so you already know what's coming, is about that thick. It's about 700 pages. So you can imagine those are not, each rule is not an encouragement rule. It's not how to get it going. It's kind of available.
I just can hear you.
So go ahead, Rob. Not to interrupt, but I had to bring that up.
So, right. So the rule book maybe looks a little bit daunting, but it's really, the rules are about, 50 pages, and the rest is guidance. That's kind of some advice there. So don't be too intimidated, Jeff, but hopefully you have a copy. So, so in the background, guys, Nacha has made it a little bit easier to get rid of checks. As people write checks, if you write a check to your utility insurance company, there's a rule that now allows that check to be converted to an ACH debit. So rather than going through the pipeline, it becomes an ACH debit. You go to Walmart or somewhere, and you go to write a check, they'll scan it and hand it back to you. It becomes an instrument for the ACH debit. So there's a number of rules that have been enacted over the years that have really helped drive checks, at least out of the clearing system, even though people may be writing them. It reminds me, you remember Mike Typley, Jeff, right?
Oh, I do.
Yeah, so he worked for the Cleveland Fed, and the Cleveland Fed, I think, is the last check clearinghouse. We did a tour up there, and I just wish we could have taken a video, because if anybody thinks checks are safer than electronic payments, should have seen this video. So we're walking through the facility, and by the way, the Cleveland Fed has an airport, has their own airport where checks fly in and checks fly out. Now, not so much with the image replacement documents, but there's actually an airport where people fly checks in, they get processed, and they fly out. And so, there were checks in shoe boxes, on rollers. There were 3 ironing boards in the room, and I said, "What are the ironing boards for?" And they say, "Well, you know what? Sometimes the checks are wrinkled and we can't read them. We iron the checks to get them processed. It's just nutty." So I digress a little bit, but to your point, Jeff, yes, there's been some things that Nacha has done from a rules perspective to make it easier to, at least in the clearing of checks, to turn them into ACH debits. And I just wanted to share one of many stories about how crazy checks are.
Hey, Rob, as on your tour, did you see the paperclip in the vault?
The paperclip? No, I didn't see that one.
So the vault is huge. It's probably 100 tons. I think they dug up the street to bring it in. And I guess there was a paperclip laying where the vault door would close, and it became embedded in part of that vault almost 100 years ago. And I know that because Mike Typley took me on a tour there.
Yeah.
So Jennifer, as a bank, and Rob, don't take this personal, has Nacha helped you in any way, or is the bank itself, done any kind of revisit of your rules or whatever you do to somehow speed up adoption and stay within the regulatory environment, obviously? But have you done anything bank-wise, business management-wise? Because those are all those concentrated accounts with lots of payments coming out of one organization.
Yeah, so, it is interesting because not only are we required to follow Nacha rules, but when we sign up an ACH originator, we also assert that they are going to follow the rules as well. And so I think that when you are working with your banking partner, if it feels like they are maybe giving you a little bit of a difficult time to move you over into being able to originate ACH items, it's because it's an area that is highly audited as a bank by the FDIC and all of the slew of other auditors that we are, beholden to. And in addition, we are also asserting that our customers are all going to follow this, as Jeff mentioned, book of Nacha rules that is quite formidable. And so we need to make sure that we're onboarding clients that are going to, do what they need to do to effectively get the permissions and what those types of things to do these payments. So when you're talking about replacing checks that you would issue, it's a little bit easier because those would be payments you're sending out to people, or as we refer to it as ACH origination payments that are credits. And I know it's opposite from the way accountants look at credits and debits. But you'll usually find that there are some options at the bank that will allow a client to sign up to originate those types of payments without the intense scrutiny that would go with the other side of it, where if you're trying to pull funds in from another bank account, originating what we call ACH debits. And so, that's why there is a process to enroll as a business in the consumer, not into the consumer space, but into the business payment space like that, because, the bank is asserting you're going to follow those rules as well. And it used to be in the past, there were also some financial obstacles to look at, and some banks still are this way. And when you get to a certain size of a client, you're certainly going to see this as well. But, there's a fee structure around ACH payments. And although the price to process an individual payment might be really low, but sometimes there are maintenance fees or file fees or things like that. that could be potential barriers depending on your banking partner. That's something we've addressed at Studio to try to make sure that even in our small business that maybe aren't sending that many payments, a month, but making it available to them and not making it at a cost that would prohibit them from using that channel.
Hey guys. Hey, it's Matt. Sorry to interrupt, but Jay is here. Jay, I think you hear us, right? And we can hear you?
Yes, can you hear me?
Perfect. So Jay's here. I think maybe we'll just do audio for the time being, but Jeff, I don't know if you want to introduce Jay quick.
Yeah, I definitely want to introduce Jay. We're going to take a step back on introductions, and Jay is the CEO of Savitsky Satin Bacon Bucci, a prominent firm here in Los Angeles. And as far as an introduction goes, I've been thinking about you, Jay. We already talked about your experience in ice cream shop and young workers, but here's a serious question, and answer one or the other, I think, of this question from your point of view. As the CEO of a large firm, what either keeps you up at night on this subject matter, or what keeps you going every day? It's which one is that prominent to you?
Well, first of all, let me apologize for no video. I can promise you I'm not in my pajamas, so that's not why. But to answer that question, I mean, all those things keep me going. Obviously, when you're working with a business management firm and you have clients, your first and foremost thought is security to your clients, making sure everything is done to protect them. In addition, doing things to protect the firm. And those things sometimes seem mutually exclusive, but in my world, they're not. We can use both of those together to make the best possible play for the clients and for the firm. And fortunately, with today's technology, there is also a great deal of security behind you. You just have to be cognizant of both things. And I've been around a long time. You can't see me from the video, but I'm 69. So I've been around way before the advent of the personal computer. I've been hearing about checks going away back in the 70s. So it's been a conversation that I've heard over the years for a long, long time. It seems like it would have happened a long time ago, but there's obviously issues that prevent that. In some cases in our firm, a lot of times it's just people that are not aware of what the availabilities are to do certain things, and they get stuck back in the past. It seems the millennials actually are way more willing to experience new things because most of them don't even own a checkbook. So in a lot of cases, they don't even know what a check is. Maybe once or twice a year, they have to pull something out. So they're all about electronics. So when the newer people come into the firm, it makes it a lot easier to establish policies that would allow ACH transactions. It's a little bit more difficult for people that have been doing it a long time because people do get stuck into their own ways. And there's a lot of misconceptions. There are still some people that think that, somebody is checking that signature every night in the back of that endorsement signature in the back of a check. There's some people that really still believe that. They don't understand that actually doesn't happen. So part of my challenge is working with everybody in the firm to get everybody on a similar system, making sure it's secure, making it as secure as possible, as efficient as possible. The nice thing about ACH is it's cheaper. Some people think it's more expensive, but doing ACH transactions is actually way less expensive. Even from the standpoint in our firm, we use the theory that we're trying to, especially in COVID, but even before COVID, we're trying to get rid of mail. We're trying to get rid of any paper. We've been paperless for about 15 years. So the last thing we need to see is an invoice come in that's done by paper that we actually have to attach to a system. And today we can set ACHs up on the large scale, meaning on national vendors, and there's a lot more smaller vendors. It could be a gardener, it could be an electrician. And in many cases, if you don't ask those people that have been getting a paper check for the past 20 years, they're never going to know that ACH is available. But if you explain to them why it makes sense, that they get their money faster. They don't have to wait for a check, that it goes directly into their account. We have found that if it's explained properly, most of those people embrace the ACH technology. And in fact, once they get started in it, if you told them they had to go back to getting a live check, they would revolt. So it takes somebody, no matter how big or small your firm is, it takes somebody that wants to sort of lead that charge and make sure people understand it's not just about changing to a new technology just because it's new technology. It's because there are reasons to do it, both on the efficiency side, both on the expense side. And once you get people doing that and they start to see the benefits of it, it's way easier to get them to going on the next stuff. So when a new vendor comes on, way easier to just go straight and set an ACH up from the get-go, rather than trying to convince somebody to change in the middle of the stream.
Yeah, that's actually a great segue, because I started the questions, and maybe you didn't hear, Jay, with the barriers of origination. And I know with you and your bank, you have no barrier for origination of ACH. But there's also the other side, which is the receiving side. There are barriers there. I can give you a quick personal story that I was actually paying my pool maintenance folks by paper check, and there was a theft in the local post office. So I switched him to ACH, which worked well until I started getting notices that I'm not paying. And I call up and I ask him why. He says something like, oh, I stopped giving my wife access to the bank account, and she was the bookkeeper. So there's a case where ACH would fail because she would never see that I was paying. I never asked why he stopped the access part. I left it at that. So interesting. So we have the other side of the coin, which is the receiving side. So I'll go to order for right now, but I'm hoping that our panelists will generate some more questions within themselves, and I can just be more of the moderator so we don't come to any kind of arguments. So we'll stop with Nacha again. Is there something Nacha has done, like maybe set up some kind of form for the receivers that you can give to the billers? So they could set up it more automatically, somehow, something to get the flow started?
Yeah, so I'm sure Jennifer has an onboarding process that she can address. You know, in the back of the rule book, the appendix, there are some helpful pro forma forms, if you will, have to do with trading partner agreements, have to do with bank, what we call them originator agreements, as Jennifer said, that kind of thing. So that's very helpful. You know, I think with respect to other things, Jeff, you know, we try to do a lot of industry education. So for good reasons, obviously we're pro ACH. I think there's a lot of reasons to move people away from check. When you look at incidences that involve check, it's a good reminder. Hey, ACH works pretty well. Frank Abagnale, catch me if you can. That he's still out there. Not him, but his descendants are still out there. Check fraud is through the roof. It's even continuing more in this time of COVID. I think COVID, you were kind of. I heard this earlier on the presentation. The internal controls are a little bit broken now with people not in the offices. It's a little more ad hoc. Hopefully you did have internal controls, so I think there's more risk, there's more exposure. Fraud's going through the roof. I think when you think about you're writing checks and you make a mistake, you send the wrong amount. When that check is cashed, you're done. With the ACH, there is an opportunity to try to do a reversal. When you think about, I've got to get this check somewhere right away because I'm going to have service cut off or I need something released. You're paying FedEx and UPS. You're paying a lot of money for that payment. So when people are looking at the cost, you got to look at those kinds of things. Checks have the unique issue of escheatment and having to produce. There's less of an audit trail there. It really does kind of go into a black hole. So we do a lot of education around that. We try to provide information and tools as well to help people with that migration from checks to paper.
And Jennifer, then as a bank, and we've talked about your originators, have you worked with your clients who are receivers to teach them how to accept the ACH? And maybe there's some bank tools that on the website where they can go in and see who the payment came from. And how do you handle that? I know some larger banks will charge additional funds for addenda information, and that's prevented some of the adoption on the receiving side. So from a bank, how have you approached that?
Yep. Especially, so we'll start with those that would have addenda information. So we see a lot of that, particularly with healthcare payments. Those are notorious for being a single payment that has a ton of information that comes across with it. Every bank should be able to provide a mechanism to give that addenda information, whether it be a transmission or an old school fax or an email or some type of secured way to get that over to the client for them to reconcile. And I feel like that things are probably trending away from that being something that's necessarily a charge. I mean, in our case, we would turn it on. We have a couple of clients that rely on that information and we turn it on. I think what would be really helpful when I kind of think about my business practice clients, a lot of times when they're trying to enroll vendors, they will hear a vendor say, well, I don't know when I get paid from you. When I get a check, I know it's there. So I know from a technology standpoint, and it kind of just dawned on me while we were having this conversation that we do have some sample vendor enrollment forms that we provide to new ACH originators so that they can then go get the proper information from their vendors and comply with Nacha rules. And there's certain pieces that have to be there. But one that is old that tends to still be there these days is a copy of a voided check, which is kind of hilarious. Every time I send it out to a client now, I'm like, by the way, the voided check requirement thing is kind of old school, so don't get hung up on that. And then the other thing I was thinking, because this would apply in our system, is to get an email address for that information from your vendor where they would like notification to go. So like in our ACH origination system, you can associate an email address with that payee. And every time you initiate an ACH file that includes that payee, it will automatically trigger that email notification that says, it comes from Studio Bank, but it says that our customer ABC company is sending you a payment for X amount on this date. And therefore they get that heads up notification, and hopefully it's going to a contact at the company that then will recognize on their side, they need to go and associate that in their accounting system with the proper invoices being paid. And you can also include additional invoice information in each client's record as well, if you choose to do that. But, that is, I think, the biggest challenge, no matter what size customer you are, is being able to reassociate the invoice information with the actual payment piece of it. And there is that perception that, well, it's on the stub of a paper check, so then I have it and I can apply it. But in these days of virtual everything, that process doesn't work as seamlessly anymore. So maybe getting it through an alternative channel like an email notification would be a better option.
Hey Jennifer, with respect to that and the receivable side, one thing we always hear a lot is, my small business customers, can't send ACH, they can't figure that out. Maybe there's issues with the remittance, as you say, and then that's very important, of course, for bigger companies, because they have to know how to apply that cash, what invoices are being paid here, so we can apply that cash. What about the debit as an option? We see that in a lot of kind of smaller invoice presentment packages. That's very easy. So that means the customer doesn't have to do anything. They provide an authorization. They provide their routing and account number at the bank. There's usually some kind of agreement about when funds can be pulled out. Maybe there's a notification ahead of time before those funds are pulled out to give some warning. But that's almost touchless, really, once that's set up.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, I would suggest, kind of going back to the presentation that was on display before we started, if you are someone who is comfortable with signing up to get incoming debits for these types of payments, and there's nothing wrong with that, and assuming that you're signing up with a reputable company, the power company, people that you recognize as being reputable, you should have no problem. But I would also recommend, if you do sign up for any automated debits like that, it's a smart thing to put what we call an ACH block filter on your account, because you don't want to not look at that information, and you want to. So, like for example, with our clients, and most places would offer this as well. You might have a certain type of account where you don't want to allow any type of ACH debits because that's not allowable activity, like an escrow account or something like that. Then you would move to the next level, which is filter. And so in those situations, usually what you'll do is work with your bank partner. You over time identify allowable debitors, and you could even potentially put a dollar amount limit. So, it kind of depends on your level of comfort with that vendor. You might say, hey, it's okay, no matter what the power company's debiting, it's good. But if it's coming from another vendor, maybe I'm okay up to $10,000 and I want to be notified of anything larger than that to approve it. So I would definitely suggest, if you do roll in ACH debits, it's perfectly fine for you to do so. Just make sure you're covered from a fraud standpoint on that other side.
That's great recommendations.
Yeah, quick. That brings you up as a receiver and an originator. So I'd like to hear you speak to that. Is what have you done, or what do you anticipate doing in building up your who you're paying, right? The receivers, the adoption, and then money coming in. How you're handling that with addendum information to make that as smooth as possible, because you've got both ends of the candle here. Exactly. So let's go first to, paying vendors, which is a huge part of what we do. A lot of people think that in some cases, having that paper check, having it in their control actually is more security. And in the end of the day, it's less security, letting, people's signatures are out there, check stock is laying around. So in the end of the day, if you could eliminate all that altogether, we'd all probably be a lot safer. But one of the most important things is to realize is that, and this is coming from the bank side, and we're currently with CNB, and they have a great program that started with Payee Positive Pay, which was designed for paper checks, which had allowed us to, through various methods, upload information to the system when we actually created a check, and they would match that check image against what came in. So there was a way of making sure that somebody was not, washing a check or creating their own check. ACH Positive Pay works virtually the same way. You set up, as Jennifer was saying, you set up in the system to show what you allow to come in. You can create a template for what you're going to allow to come in, and what you allow to go out. And if something does not match, then that's going to get picked up as an exception, and the bank sends that information either in the morning, or we log into a website and look. So we can be very careful about making sure that those ACHs do go to the people that are supposed to be going to, and that somebody else is not doing something in the middle. We actually have a third party, sort of a segregated person that reviews all Payee Positive stuff. In the business management world, we have bookkeepers and account managers, people that create the payments in the first place. If those people were in a position to approve things that were brought up, that could be, certainly not a segregation of duties. Not that we don't trust our people, but we're very careful about that. And we have, like I say, a third party every morning looking at that stuff to make sure it's correct. And going back to when you're actually creating the ACH, the security side for that, two things. Number one, it's really important when you're putting the information into whatever accounting system you use, is that information, again, is not just put in by either the bookkeeper or the account manager, whether the information comes by an email or in the mail or by the phone. We allow that because that's how it works in ours, but we actually have a second approver that reviews every new ACH setup, no different than any wire setup, to confirm that the routing information and the bank account match exactly. So we do not allow any one individual to set up ACHs. It goes through an independent
person or a couple of people in my firm that review that stuff, that have that are not doing anything for those clients specifically. So there is a total segregation of duties in that case. So it's really important to think about that. And then on the email side, most of our instructions come by email. There are a couple of times when somebody will call by phone, but before we're going to put anything in, we need to see hard copies of what that routing information is, what the bank account information is. We make sure that we voice verify all that information, because in today's day and age of cloning employee emails, social engineering, it is not out of the realm of possibility. And we've actually seen it where we get information that is not the information that came from the original source. It was somehow cloned. The most recent case, we found one of our clients' employees was emailed us to change their information, because we do all of our payroll by direct deposit. And so we need all that information. So they emailed one of our account managers and said, I want to give you new bank account information. When we verified with the employee, it turned out that employee didn't send it. That was a cloned email. And if we had gone by that instruction straight off the email, we would have been paying somebody else for as long as it took to figure out before the employee that actually worked there figured out he wasn't getting paid. Hopefully, in that case, it wouldn't last too long, because they'd realize every 2 weeks or whenever they get paid, they weren't getting it. But depending on the amount, it becomes very, very difficult to go after those funds. We find it, because we've seen it a few times in the past, where other banks are not really cooperating with C&B to give us the information of where that bank account, where that money went. So it's extremely important from our perspective to make sure that everything is set up correctly. We use forms. We have, and again, the forms can come from various sources. Your payroll company typically has their own form. In some cases, the software companies you use have forms. The banks have forms. We tend to tailor our forms. At the bottom of our forms, it actually has a place that says voice verified. So if I'm asked to approve something and I don't see that voice verified filled out, I will always go in and ask that question, because I never assume that the information is accurate. So I think you have to be really careful on the setup side, because once it's set up and it's good, then you're pretty much good. And then you have to be careful that when someone tries to change something, so you could get an email from, saying we're changing, it could be from a vendor that says we're changing our banking information. That should be a huge red flag. You don't just go in there and change it. You need to call that vendor and say, did this email come from you? Now, in most cases, it does. So in most cases, you're going to find it would seem to be a lot of waste of time and effort. But I can tell you, we have seen situations over the past couple of years, and this was even pre-COVID, where the vendor said, no, we did not send that email. So I think it's important to realize that as good as ACH is, and we love it and we use it as much as we can, there are certain inherent risks that if you just assume everything is good, and sooner or later you're going to get bit. So and it requires somebody not just assuming that everybody is doing what they're supposed to be doing. So somebody in the firm, preferably somebody that's not directly related to any one given client, would be someone that thinks about policies and procedures that sort of supersede any individual client. Because if everybody's doing things pretty much the same way, it just makes it easier going forward getting things set up. So quickly, long-winded answer, but on the receiving side, which is something much newer, but a lot of some of the guilds are starting to do it. There are people that are, so if there's ever an opportunity for us to be able to get income in electronically, we're 100% for that. And we spend a lot of time trying to get that done. There's still some people that are not, 100% up to speed in terms of willing to start doing that. I think we're going to see more of that as time goes on, because especially if you can say anything good about COVID, and there's not much, it's got us all to be thinking about that there's different ways of doing things, mostly because we didn't think that way in the beginning. Mostly we were forced to out of a need at this point. So if we take advantage and realize that there are things that we can do that will simplify our business, make it easier to run things, less expensive, and give us time to work on things that, are not just day-to-day technical things. It just gives us that opportunity. So we spend a good deal of our day thinking about new policies and procedures that allow for electronic, and obviously ACH is electronic, but whatever we can do that's better for the client and better for the firm, that's what we push for.
So in general, has anyone gone draconian? And Jay, like in your case, have you demanded that your vendors will only be paid by ACH, or has Studio positioned themselves in a way to highly encourage and highly discourage paper checks?
Well, we do that every single day, but would I tell you that we say take it or leave it? That's a tough one. So if you've got a client that has a gardener that's been their gardener for 20 years, and we picked up the phone and went to the gardener and said, either you get paid by ACH or, the client's not going to use you anymore, that wouldn't go over too well.
Yeah, I'm certainly thinking of new vendors, and clearly you're not Walmart, so that's highly understood.
And I would say, generally speaking, most new vendors are up for what we do because they want the business. So most of them are cooperative. I would not say that we have 100% ironclad. If you don't do it, we're not going to do business with you. But to me, it's all about, you can educate your employees, and we spend a lot of time doing that because we want people to not buy into systems and things just because we say do it. We want them to buy into systems because it makes sense. And I have found that with most employees, once they actually understand what you're trying to accomplish, in most cases, they actually, are like doing it. And I found in many cases, 6 months later, you'd think that they were the ones that came up with the idea in the first place because the system just runs smoother and it's just a better environment to work on. So that education process is not just for employees. That education process is for vendors. In some cases, you may be dealing with smaller vendors that aren't even aware of what's available. So we help educate those people. And again, we find in a majority of those cases, it's in the presentation. It's not in the demand. So on the bigger, national vendors, they have the stuff in play anyway. Most people are going to any firms of any real size are going to electronic because they realize it's easier for them on the receiving side. The last thing that they want to do is be getting in 100 checks that they have to go in, they have to process, they have to deposit. They're developing their own systems because they realize it's in their best interests to do ACH. So it's just a combination of continuing to educate people. And again, could we demand it? Yeah, we could say, well, we're not going to use you. But I've never seen a situation where it came down quite to that. We want people in the end to think it was their idea. And then when everything's said and done, they come back and they say, this is the greatest thing ever. And then they're going to tell their friends and they're going to tell everybody else. And then eventually over time, it's going to get better and better. Is it going to go as fast as we all want it? Probably not. Like I mentioned earlier, I've been seeing this for literally 50 years, and there's still checks out there. But me personally, I write maybe 1 or 2 checks a year, and at that. The interesting part about it at our firm, we still do have a number of clients that have their own pocket checks, and in some cases, they still love to write checks. That's a perfect example. Can you go to your client and demand they don't do it anymore? Because number one, it is a major security risk to have those checks out there. It takes way longer to code those things and keep track of them. But in the end of the day, the client is the client. We talk to them about the security risk. We get them to try to use their, an ATM card versus writing those pocket checks. But frankly, there are still some people out there that love to write those small little checks, and I don't get it, but they do it, and that's just the way it goes sometimes. So until the millennials are now those people and don't know what those checks are, we're probably going to still be fighting that battle over time.
So Jay has touched on so many things that I'll kind of speak to a little bit from the bank side. So I bet if you did go back to a lot of vendors that might have said no before COVID happened, now that'd be a yes, because they're having just as hard time either getting to their offices to get physical checks or to even get them to the branch to deposit, depending on the bank that they work with and branch hours and things like that. So I think a lot of the traditional things that made it easy to deal with checks as a vendor, I think have definitely gone out the window during COVID and made things a lot harder. We don't tell our clients, Jeff, to your point, that they, have to be on positive pay if they're still writing checks. Although I would challenge everyone out there, if you are still writing a lot of paper checks to where you don't look at it every day on your account to make sure it's valid, you need to go on positive pay. It used to be a really difficult thing to try to get done back in the old days with getting a file format into the bank, but these days that type of file, you should be able to get an Excel file out of your system and be able to upload it to your bank pretty easily. And even if you have positive pay on the paper check side, it's no guarantee. I was telling Jeff in preparation for this segment that we had a client that sent out about 10 payments one day through the mail. This was pre-COVID. And, checks cleared their account, no big deal. One of the vendors called them one day, was a pretty big vendor of theirs, and said, "Hey, we never got the last payment from you. That's unusual." Come to find out, somewhere between the mail being picked up and what ultimately happened, one of those checks got diverted. Someone had apparently, I don't know what the specifics were on that side, but someone, not the vendor, had opened a bank account at another bank and deposited that item, and it had cleared. So positive pay in that situation would have not caught it. The check wasn't altered in any way. The bank of deposit should have caught it. And one would think, oh, well, I'll get my money back from the bank. I mean, I didn't do anything wrong, as, I issued a check and something happened in the mail and somebody else who shouldn't have deposited it. But the truth of the matter is, as their banking partner, we're negotiating with the bank of deposit. It's clearly a case where the bank of deposit did not do their due diligence. Either they opened up a fraudulent bank account in that name, or they allowed that client to deposit a check that wasn't made out to them, which in either case is their fault. They're still dragging their feet on compensating our client back for that item. So then there's a whole big deal. And that's a significant amount of money that you are out during the time. I mean, there's nothing that says the receiving bank, the depositing bank, has to get it cleared up in a certain amount of time. So, you might feel like you're covered, you've got positive pay, but things can still happen in a paper check environment that even go beyond those controls. So it's, you should have it, but it's not going to be 100% of the time. And I would say those procedures that Jay mentioned in enrolling on ACH, business email compromise is by far the biggest fraud, whether it's fake ACH examples that he was giving or fake wires. Be very wary of any type of email that you're getting that affects a payment, whether it's changing payment information or sending it somewhere, different in the future or anything like that. They should always be voice verified with the originator.
We're coming up close to our hour, so if anybody has any questions, please send them through the chat, and obviously we're going to answer them to the best of our ability. Rob, do you have anything to add to that part of the conversation, being on the regulatory side? Because you've got statistics of fraud, things that we don't know. Anything you can share?
Yeah, I don't know the dirty laundry, but I would just say this has been a great tutorial, first of all, with Jay. And make sure you've got your internal controls in place. And then to Jennifer's point, your bank is really your partner in this, right? There's a lot of services your bank can provide. Getting back to some best practices, in our research, when we ask people, why do you think there's more ACH? they point to one, technology is a little bit easier, but they point to some simple things too. One is we asked. So to Jay's point, you got a new vendor, ask. Will you take ACH? We'd like to send you ACH. You got a new customer, ask. Will you pay me by ACH? Just having that communication up front, which a lot of people don't do, but having that communication up front as a best practice really helps increase electronic payments. If you want to get tough, throw your weight around a little bit, and a vendor says, nah, I don't want to take ACH. You can say, all right, well, I'll pay by check. I'm going to pay in 45 days. If you let me pay you by ACH, I'll pay you in 10 days. So there's some, depending on how much you want to get into that, there's definitely levers you can pull, but I think the best practice is to ask up front and just re-emphasizing internal controls, bank partnership as practice as well.
So then my overall summary I'm talking about is with COVID is we're still in an evolution on the ending of paper checks, certainly no revolution. And maybe when we meet again in 10 years for the same conversation, the number of paper checks will be dramatically less. Not sure.
Well, to that note, Jeff, I do think that, and we don't have time to really go into it, but the evolution of same-day ACH, in my opinion, is something that I do think, especially now, is we're going to see a huge uptick. I've sat through some presentations at the National AFP conference this week, and they've been talking about some of the volumes that they're seeing during COVID with year over year. I think they said same-day ACH is up 40% for year over year volumes, third quarter to third quarter. The dollar amount threshold, if people don't know out there, got lifted up to $100,000 for a same-day ACH item. So I think that's great news. And they're adding an additional processing window in March to give West Coast folks a greater window of availability for processing a same-day ACH. So I really think that, it's amazing. They were saying that just in general in ACH processing during COVID with all of the reimbursement payments to all of the taxpayers, that they processed 120 million additional ACH payments from that CARES Act 2 alone. And in the first day, they did 81 million direct deposit payments from the CARES Act processing. So, hopefully good things to come with more adoption.
No, you're right. And with real-time payments, RTP from the clearinghouse coming in, more banks adopting, I think we do have a chance. But as Jay also said, some folks just are going to hold on to those checkbooks forever. I'm not one of them. I'm almost fully automated, so I feel good.
I think if you sort of drill down to there's three pieces of, as I see it, how this is going to change over time. And I think if any one of those pieces is missing, it's just going to slow the wheel's not going to run quite as round. Is number one, you need, and if you're listening and you have your own firm, big or small does not make a difference. You can be a sole proprietor, but you have to buy into the fact that electronic is the way to go. There are some people that have not bought in. I know people that still have not bought into that. So the question is if you can buy into it and really believe that it makes sense and that there is enough security there to make it work, that's the first step. Because if the person that's in charge of the firm isn't sold, then no one else is going to be sold. And once you're sold, if you can educate your employees to understand why, how important it is, and get them on the same thought process as you are, then that's going to be step number two, because they're going to buy into the situation. Because if you don't, they're not going to even sell to the third part, which is the vendor, because they're just going to assume the vendor is going to say no, because frankly, they say no because they don't want to do it. So the third part of it is if you're bought into it, if your employees are bought into it, when it now comes time to get to that vendor or work with the bank to find out what new products are available, it's going to be in their self-interest to sell that product to the vendor because they believe in it as opposed to just do it. And even with COVID, there's still a lot of people out there that don't necessarily do the right thing. I mean, some people are still pretending, COVID doesn't even exist. So you can't just assume everybody's going to do the right thing. Someone's going to lead the charge. And if each of those three people, those three spokes are in unison, then it's going to go forward and go forward and go forward because everybody is going to be working towards the end game. And at the end, it saves money, it's faster, it's more efficient. And I'll tell you, I tell my people all the time, if you can do something faster, a lot of people that have a lot of clients, they think if I do things faster, more efficiently, it means you're just going to give me more clients. And I tell my employees, not necessarily. I would much rather have one of my people be fast, efficient, good, secure, and they had an extra hour at the end of the day because they did all that stuff and go sit on the beach. So you have to buy into, how this all works. It's not just there to be there. There's a reason, there's a method to it, and everybody's got to buy in to make it work really the best it can.
That doesn't work well for a Kansas business manager, by the way.
There must be a lake out there somewhere.
You're probably the lake. You're probably right. Oh, I see Matt. I think we're done. Thank you, everybody.
That was an awesome panel. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks, Matt. You take care.
It's an interesting topic. It's not necessarily one that I'm super familiar with, but I learned a lot. And I think what's interesting about this panel too is that the four of you are really coming at this from different angles too, which makes it super interesting. So I feel like we've thoroughly examined it from all angles, it was nice. Thank you.
Thank you, man.
Thank you. Appreciate it.